Hello, Jade. I'm Stephen Atha, and I am going to playtest of sorts the video that you made. Really appreciate you waiting after the last time we spoke. I appreciate you being open to giving me feedback on the video. I simply don't have time to buy and install Far Cry in order to give it an actual playthrough. That might change, but probably sometime after the jam, so let's dive right in. I'm just going to pause and talk over your video, take screenshots, and then do a quick paint over in Photoshop as I do so. Okay, I have not seen any of this before. This is all brand new to me.
Sunset Search is a 15-minute multi-target bounty hunt mission that I created for the Far Cry 5 arcade. The primary goals for this level for it to be non-linear.
Okay, I'm already going to stop right there because that's a good point. I love how you started with what it is in one or two sentences. This is a Far Cry 5 map. I made it for the jam with, and then you have goals. That's great. I've been making games for a long time, and one of the most important things I've ever learned is that people who make games tend to get really stuck on why they're making them or who they're making them for, and they tend to really talk about that as opposed to what the goals are of the game. And you always want to do what you're doing, talk about the goals of the game, because that tells the player what they need to do. That tells the prospective customer what kind of game it is, so why they might want to buy it. You know, this will tell your leads or investors what's supposed to be compelling about the game. That's very cool. Yeah, I got the genre, bounty hunt in Far Cry, and then your design goal of nonlinear. So good start.
To feature multi-directional gameplay, which maximizes the replayability of each physical space. To provide player agency, leaving it open to them how they complete the mission. Telling the player what to do, but not how to do it.
That was a good definition of player agency. I like that a lot. What's agency? Everyone has a feeling for what that is, but like, what does it mean for games? And everyone has their own definition. This is a really strong one, and it's one sentence. You know, tell them what, not how. Good stuff. Yeah, you always want to give people a goal as opposed to instructions whenever you want a player to be doing certain things. Good stuff. Oh, and I like the paint over that you had in the beginning.
But then supporting them in their endeavors with a variety of weapons to discover around the map, and each physical space crafted to afford multiple stealth, combat, and exploration experiences. I aim to achieve two of the things that I admire about Dishonored 2 levels. One of those things is creating an open space that rewards exploration and experimentation. And the second is giving the player a lot of opportunities to observe the world as a fly on the wall.
Okay, I love how you have a really clear inspiration and also like inspiration in the sense of I'm going to try and base certain game aspects on this other game. That's a very tricky thing to do. There are a lot of people who don't who are making games for the first time who are like, I just really like this game and how it makes me feel, and that's really like a beautiful thing. Like I just, you know, I don't necessarily know how to use it. And I'm not saying that you're a newbie or anything like that. It's I'm building up to a really tricky professional situation that folks are in a lot. Everybody who starts out, you know, when we're kids, we know that we love games and not necessarily why, and we know which games we love or which mechanics, but not necessarily how they work. And then that's how I got started, right? I've always loved games, like we all do. And as I became a professional, I realized how much folks want to base a current project on an existing one. Like we want to have, you know, the first-person stealth game. We want to have the stealth gameplay from Metal Gear Solid, but in first person, was something that came up in a project that I worked on. And I thought that was really awesome. You know, have a nice clear goal and a nice clear adaptation for what we were doing, right? Like we were making a first person game. It was obviously not going to be like Metal Gear Solid because that's in third person. That's already a big difference. Yeah, stuff like that. But the more I work with other people, like my current boss was saying that at one of the previous studios he'd worked for, people go too far with that. People get really extreme with, here's what we want to do from other games, and they'll start like leads at his studio. We're ordering asking folks to do whole cloth. We want it to be like this other game. Like we want that mechanic in their and our very similar genre and just have it be really similar. So your breakdown of what two things that you really like about Dishonored and how you're going to put them in your game. And you did a great job of the video. You told where you needed to. Here's what you want to do, and that it's from Dishonored, and you love it. And then you showed it with, yeah, you had the fly on the wall, and so here's the camera zooming in. That was a great example. So I think this is a really good execution of that. We love this other game. We like what they've got going on. Maybe we want to have a similar success for our game, but don't actually copy other games. You'd be amazed at how many personal and professional projects really will just try, that I've experienced, will just try and literally copy another game. Not to do the thing that we're all here as game designers to do, which is I have this feeling in the non-game world and I want to recreate it in the game world. Yeah, you're doing that with games. I have this feeling about Dishonored, and I want to make people feel similarly in this Far Cry level that I made. So you're not copying the game, but you are giving people the same experience, or experience goal more specifically. Good, 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 good. Oh, and I love your focus on you really are inspired by Dishonored, and so you have these design goals as a result. You're not rhapsodizing about all the things you love about Dishonored, and there's a lot. I love it too. You're nice and tightly constrained. Good stuff.
The bounty hunt game mode is non-linear by nature in that it simply requires the player to locate and assassinate key targets on the map, and then escape the level. I aim to construct an environment which empowers the player to engage with the mission in a variety of ways. I need to be concise here, so I'll show just the first minute of gameplay from 9 different playthroughs.
Just a quick note about the video. I don't know if this grid of videos is going to continue, but it's a little overwhelming to look at 9 video feeds. I heard what you said. You're trying to do that to be concise, and you'll probably do that really well. But that's just a note for sharing your stuff in the future.
I encourage anyone who's interested to rewatch this section a few times to really take it all in. 3 players drop down. One takes the beach west, infiltrates via stealth. One takes the beach east, finds a jet ski, and goes treasure hunting. The other one goes south through the forest and infiltrates the facility using stealth, crossing some rooftops, dropping into the bus, finding some throwing knives, and skulking around the facility. 2 of the players run south along the cliffs. One of them swings across into the depot where they're able to navigate the rooftops and get themselves into some trouble. The other one drops down onto the lower cliffs, finds a secret, and then enters the facility and gets into a gunfight. 3 players choose to go up the cliffs. One of them takes the western side, gets up into the facility pretty quickly. The other 2 take the eastern side. One of them ends up climbing up and grappling up onto the facility and getting into some combat. The other one explores the eastern cliffs. Here are rough representations of the paths.
Good. Yeah, in a jam that's all about non-linearity, these paint-overs with multiple paths are really helpful. Good stuff. Also, good job focusing on non-linear, meaning really multiple paths. I've made the mistake of referring to some open area level design that I've done as being sandbox. And I was talking to my boss, who started out as my mentor, about it, and he was just like, hey, be really careful. Sandbox game design is a very specific thing. Not every open area is a sandbox, and not all the, in my example, not all the spaces I had were even open areas. They were non-linear. There were multiple paths to do everything, and different interesting things with different advantages and disadvantages to each path. And I'm seeing that you definitely have that here, and you're not making the mistake I did. You're not calling it sandbox or open world. Yeah, the term non-linear actually always kind of bugged me, because it's not that there aren't linear paths, it's just that there's more than one for all the things I mentioned, all the different advantages, disadvantages. So this is very clear.
You just saw on those videos. Frequent playtesting and iteration were key in making sure that the level was fun and that it was delivering the intended experience. Beyond that, repetitive playtesting allowed me to identify things that became tedious over time and remove them from the level. Each area shown on the map was subject to much playtesting and iteration. The areas highlighted in orange are currently the least played areas of the map. They're kind of like gameplay dead zones unless you're doing something pretty specific. I thought about
Just a super quick note about this shot. This is not part of the game design, but you said in your voiceover the orange areas, and that was just kind of hard to see. You're doing really well in the game design so far, so I'm absolutely going to take the time to mention just how you're also sharing the work. Overall, this is a great video. If there were any serious problems, I wouldn't be taking this time to be talking about it. So there's a note that those orange areas are kind of hard to see.
Removing them, but I think it's good to have some white space on the map that kind of creates this relief for the player when they get in over their head and they need to retreat.
Okay, I'm back to the game design feedback. Yeah, what you were just saying in the voiceover, I'll repeat it in case it's not picking up the mic. Sorry. Some white space, as you called it, just some rest areas, is a hugely important thing for level design. You don't want nonstop action unless you're making like a chase sequence. One of the level designers who I really admire most, Scott Rogers, excuse me. Steve Lee has a video about Scott Rogers. So I'll send you a link to that when I send you this video. Scott Rogers is actually a friend of mine, and he was in the level design talk that Steve Lee references. Yeah, Scott was just really clear. One of the most important things he's ever learned about level design is giving the player rest areas after stuff. And I'm seeing it in plenty of the jobs that I'm applying to for just sort of what we expect you to do if you work at our company as a level designer are these pace breaking elements. And when you're doing level design, that always means like a space afterwards. So I think you're exactly right. And that's a pretty I don't find that a lot. I don't find a lot of folks focusing on breaking up the pace and giving these rest areas. So very good. I'm reading a book right now called Emotional Design. It's all about design in every category, you know, things like product design, architectural design, and it's really useful for video games. What you're doing does something very cool that this book makes clear. There are roughly three types of emotional processes that people go through. And when we're making video games, we want people to have experiences. You know, we have experience goals to make people feel a certain way. And you're not going to enable those feelings in people if you don't give them a chance to reflect on stuff. The book, you know, refers to this as just the reflective aspect of using a product and having an emotional experience. And these rest areas do the game design task of breaking up gameplay, giving people a literal rest, but then also give people this moment to literally reflect. You know, when a player goes through a really difficult challenge, it's supposed to feel good and rewarding afterwards. Success is supposed to mean something, it feels good, and that makes you want to keep going, go through all the game loops. If you don't give, as a level designer, you always want to give people these rest areas so they have a chance to reflect. So that's really good.
The benefit of being able to get started right away creating levels and not worry about creating the game itself cannot be overstated. That said, there are some severe memory limitations, and even worse is that there are reliability issues with the scripts when the memory is above maybe 80%. For that reason, I had to rely on the wave spawning system, which is relatively limited, and I had to use the control zone system for the AI.
Just a quick note, I'm not 100% sure what you're talking about with these. Like, I know what a memory limitation is, but I'm wondering, does that mean for the software you use? Like, it's going to lock you out of putting X amount of things in your level because this was a Far Cry game and that was their limitation for target hardware? Or are you talking about your computer? Like, I'm just not sure what you mean by that. I think that that's still a really awesome point. You're a game designer, and so you've learned to work with constraints, like software and hardware constraints. Similarly, I'm not 100% sure what you're referring to. I mean, roughly I know what you mean when you talk about the wave spawning system and things like that. Like, I know what those systems are, but I'm not sure why they're limiting you. So I love that you're making a Far Cry map because it's so polished immediately. That's always a really strong move, and it gets out of the way of you doing level design. So you might want to, not a lot of people know there is a Far Cry level editor, let alone have used one. You might want to get a little more detailed with why these limitations exist, just to really, to make sure I'm not left with any questions. Like just, you know, paint the picture in a little bit more, because I want to be able to follow you. But right now, I'm No, I got a couple questions. Not a big deal though, but I did want to take the time to mention it.
The control zones that I used are sort of represented here in a primitive way with my little drawing, and the spot that has the skull and crossbones is actually an extra control zone that is placed over top of two other control zones, making this area of the map by far the most difficult for the player to stealth through without getting caught, because there is a lot of patrolling going on here. Thanks to extensive playtesting, I was able to identify a pacing issue that would occur when the player disengaged off one side of the island.
I got a small level design thing for you up for the video you're showing in the upper right hand corner. The texture that you've picked for these tunnels, it looks great, but it's a little confusing when you're walking. Just the stairs are so steep. I can't tell if that I'm looking along the ceiling until you move, or I thought I was looking down the ceiling. I just did it. I thought I was looking down the ceiling, and it turns out I was looking at a wall. Because you're in a level editor for a AAA game, you might want to just use some of the existing assets they have to put something. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but that wall that you're looking at directly in the upper right hand corner, the gameplay footage. Put some kind of poster or light or similar prop that makes sense up on a wall, just the player knows what they're looking at. It was a little confusing when I was watching this footage, and yeah, that would help a lot.
When the player
I made that sound like it's a big deal. It's not. I just trailed off there. Yeah.
Disengaged off one side of the island. I was able to alleviate that pacing issue by adding the tunnel shown here. Before, when the player would disengage in this direction, it would often be over a minute before they saw action again. With this tunnel, we can cut that down to maybe 20 seconds if the player is really eager to get back into it.
I like your emphasis there. You added this tunnel. Okay, why? Well, it speeds up the gameplay. This is an action game. For a variety of I trust that there's a variety of game design reasons why that happened. Where you said, yeah, you want the player to go from A to B, but that means a minute of walking, and that's way too long. So good job adding the tunnel.
This is where I hit the memory cap on the editor. Otherwise, this tunnel...
There you go. Sorry, I just heard you explain the thing I was asking about before. Memory cap. What kind? Why do you have memory cap? I'm not sure what's going on. Memory cap for the editor. So that was clearer than the way you were phrasing it before. Again, small deal, but now that my question's answered, I wanted to paint in the picture myself. Also, one thing I recommend now that I'm 5 minutes in, using chapters in YouTube to break up what these different sections are. That's like one of the most important pieces. I was really surprised to learn this. One of the most important pieces of advice I ever learned about showing your work as a game designer is to make your work skimmable, because no two studios do things exactly the same. So you really want to make sure that your work has individual elements that someone can find really quickly. I used to be really worried that I was always making everything too long. Is this one page that, about this level I made too long? Is this other video, like, is that too long? And my current boss was just like, it's really not about the overall length. Everyone beats you over the head with the fact that you want this to be as small and as short as possible, small and as short as possible, simple as possible. That doesn't mean don't make the mistake I did and think that meant everything had to be like 10 words long and videos had to only be a minute. No, it's really useful to have the information broken down to extremely small bits so people can find individual stuff. Like if I was a recruiter and I wanted to see your work, if I found you, then I'd probably be looking for a few things. FPS gameplay, works in a level editor, not an engine. Maybe I'm recruiting for a studio that's got game design pillars similar to Far Cry, so I just want to see the specific Far Cry stuff you did. This video is great, but if there were many, many chapters, like along the bottom here, there were just sections of the video that were labeled, I'd be able to just click on them and see what that was, right? Like a section about Far Cry specifically, about the Far Cry level editor specifically, about sequence breaking like I was talking about, adding the rest periods, about just leaning into the FPS genre specifically. Like, you've got all that stuff here, but it's not, I can't click on a specific part of it and know what I'm going to get. I'm very happy to watch the whole video, to do a playtest with you as part of the jam, but yeah, I was very, very much. I got reached out to by more recruiters more quickly than I ever had after I got this advice from my boss, which is make your videos and make your website skimmable. Don't skip the content. I think you have a great at 11 minutes 50 seconds. I think this is a great amount of content. But yeah, breaking up into little sections so I can skim it, that would take it to 11 out of 10.
With this tunnel, this is where I hit the memory cap on the editor. Otherwise, this tunnel was going to be a bunker, and it was going to be connected to a network of underground rooms and tunnels, and there was going to be a couple more entrances to this bunker throughout the map in areas where I had identified that I wanted a little bit more going on. The red X's on this map are the locations of various equipment pickups. Some of them are hidden, some of them are not. The majority of them are accompanied by a lit lantern.
When you're talking about the equipment pickups, pardon me, I don't play Far Cry, so I don't know what that is. I get that it's a collectible of some kind, but is this an upgrade to existing stuff? Does this mean additional weapons? Does this mean something that enables you to open a room and then get more collectibles? So I just appreciate a little bit more information there. And I really like what you're saying, what you are saying shortly before I paused. You have signifiers. You have lit lanterns to tell people, to tell players, this is something you want to get. Here it is, and every time you see a lantern, it means you found the thing. Very good.
Wanted to use the lantern as visual language for loot. I wanted to do this because this level is intended to take place in the dark, even though we're looking at the map in the light because it's easier to see. So, while the player is navigating in the dark, it's easier for them to see these beacons of light in the distance and be lured towards them. Initially, the player was only able to take a build where they had no weapons to start, and they only had the grappling hook and the parachute and the wingsuit. I did this to support the exploration side of the level. I really wanted to encourage the players to be looking around for weapons when they started. Received feedback from someone that they would rather just play the entire level with their preferred build, and it made me realize that even though forcing the player to start with no weapons forces them to engage with the exploration side of the level, it actually sabotages the level in terms of...
I like the naked snake, that reference to what I think is a reference to Metal Gear Solid. That was just fun.
replayability, and it does take away the agency from the player in being able to choose how they want to approach the level to begin with. So for that reason, though the default is still to start with no weapons, the player has the option, if they wish, to choose a variety of different things that support different play fantasies, such as a silenced pistol or more like a Rambo loadout with a light machine gun and lots of explosives and that sort of thing.
Really appreciate how you have the courage and realize it's smart to talk about the mistakes that you made. That's great. I know a lot of people, I used to be one of those people who thought that this is about being like good enough in the eyes of a critical mass of people, and I would never talk about things I did wrong and try and hide things I did wrong, and that was a huge mistake for me. So good for you for not just having the guts to be like, hey, I made a mistake and here's what happened. But I mean, that's great design work. I got my first job out of school not by being a perfect designer, but by, making a bunch of mistakes. And that person who was there talking to me about how it could have been better and how this is how most games do it and stuff like that wound up hiring me, not because I made few enough mistakes. I was considered, oops, sorry, alarm going off, sorry about that. Anyway, I was not hired because I made few enough mistakes. I was hired because I made lots of mistakes and always talked about it and explained my process and what I was trying to do. And then when I got information about how to fix it, I was able to just move forward with it. And talking about my mistakes turned out to be the thing that made my process, what we're all doing when we're making a level design portfolio is we're sharing our design processes. I talked about my mistakes, they became clear, and so I got the actionable feedback and was able to fix it and stuff like that. Took me a long time to do what you're doing, so that's awesome.
Though the editor didn't enable me to do the types of scripting I would have liked to do, I still designed the level from the ground up with the sort of fantasy that I was working on a AAA immersive sim title, and that there would be the functionality to build in this other stuff. And I just, of course, didn't integrate it in the map because I can't. So various things that I would, of course, include if this were more like a Dishonored type game, like an immersive sim with a storytelling aspect, is that I would have had these NPC interactions scattered around the map that the player would have observed. I would have had the NPC who's driving into the facility, of course, stop the vehicle at the gate. There would have been some kind of interaction there. I have some prisoners in the map that you can rescue and they'll fight with you, but of course I would have them talk to you. I would also have another civilian hiding somewhere else on the map that hints about the location of those prisoners. Beyond that, I would have certain things like triggers that where if you do a certain thing or if you walk in a certain area, it's going to trigger certain guards to spawn and to take a specific patrol route and to say specific things just to create that extra tension. Uh, Beyond that, I would also scatter documents and audio logs throughout the map as well. Anywhere that there's a tiny blue X would have been a good spot in the map for the player to find a note or an audiobook or something like that. Audio log, rather. So those, and for example, one other thing I guess is just so there's the helicopter pad, and there's an X nearby, a pink X nearby. That would be the standing trigger, whereas if the player walked up to that point, then there would be some guards having a conversation next to the helipad, or even better, there's a helicopter taking off and it has some other story character that we recognize, that sort of thing, right? So any of those things would have been amazing if we could have integrated those into the project, but of course there are some limitations with the editors. So this is just kind of like a fantasy wish list.
I like how you say fantasy wish list at the end. I thought that was funny. It also, much more importantly, reminded me of when you were talking about loadouts, and you're talking about how you felt you made a mistake not giving the player stuff at first. I really, I think it's very insightful that you refer to the different loadouts the player can start with, and all the things that lets the player do as being able to play out different fantasies. I appreciate the humor that you said, you know, naked snake when you had nothing, and then also you have the Rambo build, which gives you the M60, the light machine gun. I think that's a great way to look at it that I never did. Like, I could tell you that playing a game, one reason people play games is to live out fantasies in a safe way, sure, but each loadout is a specific fantasy. Yeah, I have a lot of fun with themed loadouts like everybody does, but that's a great way of looking at it, I feel, is, yeah, each loadout is a fantasy. I can see myself doing hard mode, doing Naked Snake just because I like challenging myself. Like, that's a fantasy I play out. So that was great.
In closing, I'm happy with what I was able to accomplish, and I'm excited to take what I learned on this project and apply it to the next one. Some of my key takeaways are: number one, I get better results when I use a rapid playtesting and iteration cycle. Number two, streamlined level editing tools have huge benefits, but you have to intentionally plan to leverage their strengths and accept their limitations early on. Number three is that having an easily accessible playtest audience through the Far Cry Arcade that could give me positive or negative feedback was invaluable.
I want to take the time to say thank you again for waiting for me. I know I said, hey man, I'll get back to you as soon as possible, and then that was like 12 days ago. Um, yeah, I love playtesting and having my stuff playtested. It's one of my favorite parts of being a game designer. Let me know when you work on stuff, and I would be happy to, like, even though the jam's going to be over very soon, be happy to continue testing stuff and working with you on stuff.
Even though I couldn't get specific player feedback from those players, there's a large enough audience there that I was able to get hundreds of ratings over the course of a couple of days. Being able to keep track of how those ratings were reacting to changes that I made with each update to the map, though imprecise, was still incredibly valuable for me to be able to confirm whether or not a change that I made had a generally positive or generally negative impact on player experience. If you're still watching this, or if you skipped through most of the video and watching the end for some reason, I just wanted to ask you for feedback. I would love to make this level better, but I would also love to make this video better, because this level is going to be the first piece in my level design portfolio, and this video is going to be the thing that represents it.
Very impressive that this is the first thing going in your portfolio. Very nice. I would really like to actually fully play it. This seems great so far. Um, yeah, first piece in your portfolio. Very impressive.
And if you're hearing this, then this is a version of the video that is not yet being used as a portfolio piece, and I've probably just shared it in a Discord or text message or something like that. So please let me know, what did you think of the video? Is there something that I can do to make it better for a portfolio video? Is there something that you liked about it, didn't like about it? Let me know. If you do have Far Cry 5 installed, please check out the level. It takes only 10 to 15 minutes to complete. I would really appreciate your feedback, and hope you have a great day.
Awesome. All right, my friend, I'm going to throw this up on YouTube, send you a link, and chat with you about it on Steve's server. Thank you so much for the level, and I'll talk to you soon. Great job.